When I boot up my computer these days and I proceed to check the news of the day, or when I come home in the evening and click on the television set, watch what's on the news, when I'm passing through a hotel or an airport and pick up a newspaper and sit down to read what's happening in the world, I am gripped with a feeling that we are skating along the ragged edge of disaster. It's not that we haven't been on this ragged edge before. It's not that we haven't been close to it before. It's not that we haven't gone up to it and backed away from it before. But the problem as I see it today, as I watch it, is no one seems to know what to do to pull back from the edge. And it's everywhere. I mean, it is everywhere. And in the course of thinking this through, I was drawn to a singular chapter in the Bible that I think sheds a lot of light on the question, if one can just get by the confusion that surrounds the concept that this chapter of the Bible is advancing for us to read and to think about and to consider. Chapter in question is the 28th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy, and we will spend some time there today. If you have your Bible, you would probably wish to open it there. Deuteronomy 28 is not a prophecy, although it reads like a prophecy very much as one reads through it. And many of the statements that are made by the prophets as you read through the prophets in the Bible are really based upon the concepts, the ideas of this chapter. And it's not a statement of law, although it's in one of the books of the law, and it makes frequent references to the law. Deuteronomy 28 is a classic if-then statement. That is, it's a statement of, if these conditions prevail, then this is the result that you can anticipate to come about as a result of these conditions. All the computer programmers, way back, from basic forward, know what an if-then statement is. If this happens, then this is to take place. Now, this is an old idea. It goes all the way back to the 28th chapter of Deuteronomy. So God says to us, if this happens, this is going to be what falls out from this thing. Now, there are two major aspects of divine law that I think are poorly understood by most people. And they are represented in a way by two major divisions of the law, which are also poorly understood. And one of my objectives today is going to be to try to help you to understand more clearly what these divisions and conceptions are all about relative to the law. One misconception is, one of the things you need to understand that's presented in this is that the law is based on and grows out of reality. In other words, when you read through the biblical law, there is not one law in the Old Testament that is arbitrary. God could not have just as easily said, thou shalt commit adultery, to allow us all to have a lot more fun. That the law against adultery arises out of reality, out of human nature, the way things are, not the way that we would necessarily like for them to be. Call this the natural law. The other side of this is the law that identifies God. Call it the spiritual law. Now, this passage deals with both aspects of the law, but I don't think that is generally recognized. So let me take you to Deuteronomy chapter 28, and let me show you what I'm talking about. In Deuteronomy chapter 28, in verse 1, it shall come to pass, if you will listen diligently to the voice of the Lord your God, to observe to do all of his commandments which I command you this day, that the Lord your God will set you on high above all the nations of the earth. And all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you, if you shall listen to the voice of the Lord your God. If, then. This is going to happen if. This is the way it is presented to us here. Now, I honestly believe most people, when they approach these things, think that, well, here's God, and he's got a system of worship, he's got a set of laws, and if we will just do these things, then God himself will actually pull levers, flip switches, do things to make life work better for us than it would otherwise work. You think that's a fair idea that a lot of people think that? Is that what is really at work here? The answer, I think, is no. And I'll explain to you what I mean, or at least not entirely what is at work here. Now, I don't believe these statements would be worded quite the same way if they had been written today. They are just as true today in principle as they ever were, but I really believe that if you just understand that if these were being written in the 21st century, They would be worded differently. There would be different applications. For example, verse 3 says, "Blessed shall you be in the city, and blessed shall you be in the field. Blessed shall be the fruit of your body, and the fruit of your ground, and the fruit of your cattle, the increase of your kind, the flocks of your sheep. Blessed shall be your basket and your store." Now, what he is simply saying here is, you'll have healthy bodies, a healthy agricultural economy, and all this stuff goes hand in hand. Why will you have this? Because you keep the commandments of God. Now, here's the question. Does this happen to us directly because we keep the commandments of God, or is it indirectly because we keep the commandments of God and then God does something to make this work? Otherwise, this is the question you got to wrestle with as you make your way through this particular passage of Scripture. He says, "Blessed shall you be when you come in. Blessed shall you be when you go out. The Lord shall cause your enemies that rise up against you to be smitten before your face. They'll come out at you in one column, and they'll flee before you 7 ways. The Lord shall command the blessing upon you in your storehouses, in all that you set your hand to, and he shall bless you in the land which the Lord your God gives you." Now, what he's gone beyond now, first of all, strong, you'll be healthy. You'll have a strong agricultural economy. Now he says you're going to have a strong economy in general and a strong military presence in the world as well. Why are you going to have all these things? Because you keep the commandments of God. I think that's interesting. So, the Lord shall establish you a holy people to himself as he has sworn to you, if you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God, if you will walk in his ways. Okay, so we have established the fact that there is a cause and effect relationship between keeping the commandments of God and being healthy, wealthy, and wise, and militarily strong as well. A definite connection between these things. Now, what commandments is he talking about? Well, all of them, but starting with the 10 Commandments. Take, for example, the 5th commandment. "Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God gives you." Right here is the fundamental principle of maintaining the family relationship, which is the foundation of all ties having to do with community. So the law of God steps up first and says, okay, in your society and in your community, you must be committed to the strength of the family relationships. Children should be required to honor their parents. And that is a very broad statement, far more so than I think most people realize. It has to do with a great deal more than sending a card on Mother's Day, or giving your mom a call on Mother's Day, or sending your dad something, a new fishing reel on Father's Day. It's a lot more than that. And it has to do with the maintenance of the family. It's a part of the original law of God. The 6th commandment, "Thou shalt not kill." What God says to us, create a culture of respect for life and stay away from the culture of death. And so consequently, a civilization based upon this law would normally have laws that protect life at all levels. They would certainly want to protect the weakest and the most helpless in society, starting with the little children who can't, and infanticide is one of the things that any society based on the law of God would stop right from the very beginning. The possibility of killing a little child, like Pharaoh asked the midwives of Israel to do, of the Israelite children, would never start in a country that was based upon the 10 Commandments, because it says, "Thou shalt not kill." And in fact, in our own country, for so many generations, we had laws prohibiting abortion, prohibiting infanticide, and of course the idea of euthanasia, of killing an old guy because he couldn't maybe get his food down anymore, or because he was in pain, or because some third person decided his life wasn't worth living, would never have crossed our minds. But it is a serious part of the medical community, of the bioethics debate that's going on in our civilization right now. And so those laws are already being changed. They've been changed. One of them has been changed in Oregon. They've already been changed on the continent before now. And this movement is beginning to take place through our society as people move away from the basic commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," which has to do with a culture of life as opposed to a culture of death. Then there's the 7th commandment, "Thou shalt not commit adultery." Maintain the sanctity of marriage, the foundation of the family. Now, what right did our government have 100 years ago to prohibit divorce, or to inhibit divorce, or to try to stop divorce from happening, to make it hard to get a divorce? What business did the government have to do with regulating marriage in the first place? Well, the government has any civilization has a very strong reason and to be involved in marriage and the maintenance of marriage, because marriage is the foundation of the family, and the family is the foundation of a civilization. You don't maintain these things, and the results that are being talked about in Deuteronomy 28 are not going to come your way. When you allow the family to disintegrate, when you allow the family to deteriorate, nothing's going to work downstream for you. The 8th commandment, thou shalt not steal. One of the most fundamental considerations of our society or any others is the respect for private property. The value of private property, that you have a right to own something and nobody has the right to take what you own away from you. That is so simple, and yet it is so easily given away in different parts of the world from time to time. Then there's the 9th commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness against your neighbor. Now, from this commandment also flows the basic ethic of truth, of not lying, telling the truth to your neighbor. And I would have to say that we do not live in a culture of truth anymore in this country, that lying has become so common at the highest levels of government that we can see a politician on television, answering questions of one of the talking heads, and you have no confidence whatsoever that this person is telling you the truth, because we now live in a culture of lies. But actually, the commandment itself is a little more specific than that. It is, you shall not go in and formally put up your right hand, swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and then lie and bear false witness against your neighbor. Now, I don't know if you understand this or not, but probably the most fundamental consideration in a civilized society for the maintenance of order, for the maintenance of all the rest of these commandments about how a society works, is that whenever a person is compelled to tell the truth under penalty of law, he tells the truth, and the law punishes him if he doesn't. It's really simple, because without truth, you can have no justice. If people could come into court, swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and lie without any penalty ever coming their way as a result of it, you can forget about justice. And in fact, we're a long way down the road in this country to forgetting about justice, I'm sorry to say, but these are fundamental. Justice is impossible in a country that does not maintain this law, the 9th commandment. When people can go into court, lie with impunity, your justice system will collapse. And so will property rights and nearly everything else, including the family, in your society. The 10th commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, your neighbor's wife, his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that belongs to your neighbor. Not only must you maintain the letter of the law, you see, of what belongs to somebody else, you must maintain a heart for it as well. Now consider a nation that maintains these laws and all the related laws as a part of its constitution and its code. What does God say we can expect to come from a nation that maintains these fundamental principles as a part of its constitution, its common law, and its code? Here's the result. Verse 10 of Deuteronomy 28. All the people of the earth shall see that you are called by the name of the Lord, and they shall be afraid of you. Afraid of you. You will be the strongest person around, strongest nation around. You will be the big he-bear of the woods, the one who is really feared by all far and wide. The Lord shall make you plenteous in goods. You will become wealthy. In the fruit of your body, you'll have lots of children. In the fruit of your cattle, they'll be healthy. In the fruit of the ground, the land the Lord swore to your fathers to give you. The Lord shall open to you his good treasure, the heaven to give the rain to your land in his season, and shall bless all the work of your hand. You shall lend to many nations, and shall not borrow. Think about that. We're not just talking at a personal level here, like I lend you some money. We're talking about lending not to people. We're talking about lending to nations of people. You will be, what this is simply telling us, the wealthiest nation in the world. Why? Because you build your civilization on law, in particular God's law. And the Lord shall make you the head and not the tail. You shall be above only, you shall not be beneath. Your foreign policy is going to prosper in every way you turn. If you listen to the commandments of God, this is it. This is the if part of the statement. If you will listen to the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you this day, to observe and do them. You shall not go aside from any of the words I command you this day to the right hand or to the left to go after other gods to serve them. Okay? So we all understand the basic if-then statement, don't we? Now, cast your mind back 100 years. and ask yourself, where in the world would I find nations so blessed? Where would I go to find people that were really feared by other nations, that were the head and not the tail, whose foreign policy was dominant in world affairs, who were movers and shakers, who didn't need to have to be afraid of anybody, who would be the lenders to the world and not the borrowers, would be the ones that really were able to be helpful to other nations around about? Where do you go to find those people? Not hard to find at all, is it? Everyone knows who those people were 100 years ago. Maybe even as little as 50 years ago, we know to some extent who these people were. They are the English-speaking peoples of the world, the British and the American empires, if I may use that word. That's where you go to find the people 100 years ago who were on the then side of this statement. That's the kind of nations that they had become. And you see, the fact is that these commandments I've been going over with you found their way into British common law and into the American Constitution. That the whole thinking of the men who originally put together the government of this country realized that the laws and so forth, the structure they were putting, was based on time-honored, age-old principles. They borrowed a lot of them from British common law, but they improved them in many important ways, and they really were based upon the Bible, because the Constitution and all of our documents and all of our laws since that time have been based on concepts of property life, the maintenance of the family, the ability of individuals to pursue happiness, and all these wonderful things that they wove into our original documents, which started with the presumption that all men are created equal, and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. It all started with that. The acknowledgement of the Creator, and then the realization that from that Creator flowed to us a knowledge of the way to govern ourselves. And that was all a part of it. I forget which one of the founding fathers it was that said this, but he said our Constitution is really designed for a Bible-reading people and a Bible-believing people, and is totally unfit for any other. Would not serve to any other. And I think we may yet live to see, to our regret, how true that statement will become. We have had laws protecting marriage, the family, private property, the judicial system, truth before the law, and human life were, 100 years ago, very strong factors in ours and the British and the Australian and the Canadians' governments and way of life. Now, where in the world would you have looked 100 years ago to find the reverse? Now go to the complete opposite of what we have been talking about here. Well, that's really easy. Take a look at sub-Saharan Africa, and you will not need to look any further as far as where these people had come. Listen to what God says through Moses in Deuteronomy 28:15. Listen to how he puts this. It shall come to pass, if you will not listen to the voice of the Lord your God to observe to do all his commandments and statutes which I command you this day, these curses shall come upon you and overtake you. Listen to them. Cursed shall you be in the city. Cursed shall you be in the field. Cursed shall be your basket and your store. Cursed shall be the fruit of your body and the fruit of your land, the increase of your kind, the flocks of your sheep. Your infant mortality rates and the loss of cattle and so forth are going to be astronomical. Cursed shall you be when you come in, and cursed shall you be when you go out. The Lord shall send upon you cursing, vexation, and rebuke in all you set your hand to do until you're destroyed, until you perish quickly because of all the wickedness of your doing, whereby you have forsaken me. Well, wait a minute. Those poor people, they never knew, did they? Their fathers did. Their fathers did. In the days after Noah, everybody did. And as time went on, people who began to move away from the center of civilization, in many cases also moved away from the fundamental principles of the law of God. The Ten Commandments, the laws, the statutes, and judgment, which although they had not been codified, were not codified until Moses, were all known by these people from time immemorial as to a right way to live, about the fundamental things that people had to understand. And so consequently, you do not see, when you get into certain civilizations around this world, in India, and Africa, and some of the more impoverished parts of Southeast Asia, you do not see the results immediately of the moving away from God. It is a centuries and even millennial-long process of the decay of a civilization that can take place because of a moving away from the fundamental principles of the law of God. Listen more to what he says. The Lord shall make the pestilence cleave to you until he has consumed you from off the land where you go to possess it. The Lord shall smite you with a consumption, with a fever, with an inflammation, extreme burning, with the sword, with blasting, mildew, and they shall pursue you till you perish. And the heaven that's over your head shall be brass, the earth that is under you shall be iron. The Lord shall make the rain of your land powder and dust. From heaven it shall come down unto you until you're destroyed. The Lord shall cause you to be smitten before your enemies. You shall go one way against them out, and flee 7 ways before them. Instead of it being the one way, they come against you one way and flee 7 ways. You will go against them one way, and you'll flee 7 ways. Now, let me make an emphasis here. Because of the fact that I pointed at Africa, not one word of this is racial. It has anything whatsoever to do with race. It has to do with law, pure and simple, and the understanding of the law of God. That is what the issue is. Now, there's some important things in here. He says, your carcass shall be meat to all the fowls of the air, to the beasts of the earth, and no man shall run them away. The Lord will smite you with the botch of Egypt, with the hemorrhoids, the scab. The Lord shall smite you with madness and blindness and astonishment of heart. You shall grope at noonday like the blind gropes in the darkness. You shall not prosper in your ways. You shall only be oppressed and spoiled evermore. But as I ask you, look at what has happened to the poor people of sub-Saharan Africa. They have been oppressed and spoiled by people from all over the world for generation after generation after generation, have just walked over these people. Is it their fault? Not really. Not really. Because they don't know. They have no idea how they came to the pass that they are in today. They have no idea of how they got there. And frankly, some of us, some peoples of the world, who do know how they got there or do know better, have been among those that have spoiled them. You shall betroth a wife, another man shall lie with her. You shall build a house, you shall not live in it. You'll plant a vineyard, and you'll not gather the grapes. 2 things have gone. The family is gone. Property rights are gone. You build your own house, it's not going to be yours. Somebody will take it away from you. You marry a wife, somebody else is going to be sleeping with her behind your back. This is the way this is going to work. Your ox shall be slain before your eyes, and you won't get to eat it. Your ass shall be violently taken away from before your face and not restored to you. It's just more of the loss of property rights. Your sheep shall be given to your enemies. You shall have none to rescue them. Your sons and daughters shall be given to another people. Your eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in your hand. And I hearken back to the time, one of the most heartbreaking eras in the history of man, when African children were torn away from their parents, slammed into slave ships, taken across the Atlantic if they lived long enough to get across it, and were thrown into the sea if they didn't live long enough to get across it, and the horrible Holocaust that took place for generations after that period of time, for which the African people paid dearly, and for which, as I've said elsewhere, I think we also have paid very dearly, because I strongly suspect that our own Civil War was God's judgment upon us for the years of slavery that we practiced in this country. He says, the fruit of your land, verse 33, and all your labors shall a nation you know not eat up, and you shall be only oppressed and crushed all the time. You shall be mad for the sight of your eyes, which you shall see. The Lord will smite you in the knees and in the legs with a sore botch that can't be healed, from the sole of your foot to the top of your head. The Lord shall bring you and your king, which you shall set over you, to a nation which neither you nor your fathers have known. And there you shall serve other gods, wood and stone. You shall become an astonishment, a proverb, a byword among all nations where the Lord shall lead you. You'll carry a lot of seed out in the field, gather very little in. The locusts shall eat it. You'll plant vineyards and dress them, but you're not going to drink the wine or gather the grapes. The worms will eat them. You shall have olive trees throughout all your coast, but you will not get the oil. The olive shall drop its fruit ahead of time. All the trees, all the fruit of your land shall the locust consume. The stranger that is within you shall get up above you very high, and you shall come down very low. He will lend to you, you shall not lend to him. He shall be the head, you shall be the tail. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon you and pursue you and overtake you until you are destroyed, because you didn't listen to the voice of the Lord your God, to his commandments, his statutes, which he commanded you. It's exhausting to read this passage. It's just exhausting to consider the implications of what we read here. Because this passage of Scripture is true, not merely of Israel, not merely of Judah, but of every nation, every people, every ethnic group on the face of this earth has to look to the fact And what this is all about is that the if-then statement is true. If you obey God's law, then you will prosper. You disobey or ignore God's law, you will not prosper, you will suffer. This has been true for 6,000 years, and it is true today. And so consequently, when we look at this, we begin to realize suddenly, wait a minute, what we're talking about here is simple cause and effect. We're not talking about God in heaven having, God at the console with a big bank of TV cameras, TVs in front of him and a clicker, and a console where he can flip switches and wreck people's lives and make people's lives at his will or at his whim. That's not what's going on here. Because for the most part, God doesn't lift a finger. We destroy ourselves. God doesn't have to take steps to destroy us. The object lesson is there in the news, right before us every day. 100 years ago, you could look around the world and see this. It took a long time for some of it to come to fruition. As I said, there was a time in the days after Noah when the fathers of the African people knew God and knew His law. But it did come. It did come, sooner or later. And now, Africa is on the edge of complete, ragged edge of disaster due to the AIDS epidemic. And the more I've read about that, most people in this country go blissfully unaware of what's happening in Africa. Because in our country, AIDS is beginning to come under control. It's not going to go away. We're going to have AIDS with us probably from who knows now to whenever because of the behaviors of certain kinds of people. But at the same time, in Africa, this thing has gone beyond the capacity of anyone to even begin to grapple with it. They are on the ragged edge of total disaster. I forget the numbers now. I had them in a radio program not long ago of the millions of children who are orphans in Africa because of the AIDS epidemic that are down there. Not just hundreds of thousands, millions of them are orphans. And who's taking care of them? Other relatives, some of whom are themselves suffering from AIDS and are going to be dying from it, and many of the children are going to be dying from it in years to come. No one knows yet the scope of that disaster and the terrible impact it's going to have, not merely in Africa, but around the world before it all plays out. And it's an epidemic, and this is one of the things that struck me so much. I did a radio program on it. Perhaps you heard it. It's due almost entirely to factors of the law that the law of the Bible was intended to prevent. One of the theories of how AIDS actually entered the human population, if you didn't know this, is that it was hunters in Central Africa who were hunting a particular kind of monkey, and it was basically for meat. They would kill the monkeys, and of course in the process of butchering the monkeys, they got all the blood on them from the monkeys and so forth, and ate the meat of these animals. And consequently, SIV, that simian immunodeficiency virus, entered the human population as HIV, or human immunodeficiency virus. Now, anyone who knows much about the Bible knows that if you are obeying the law of God, you don't eat monkeys. You only eat animals that chew the cud and part the hoof. So you don't eat monkeys at all. So if you were following that, you wouldn't be hunting monkeys for meat, you wouldn't be slaughtering them, you wouldn't be getting the blood all over everything, and you wouldn't contract HIV. But even if you did, if following that, if you were hunting these animals, if you followed carefully the biblical laws regarding blood, that the blood of an animal is to be treated with respect, poured on the ground, not ingested, and so forth, you have got another step in here which might have prevented the outbreak from going any further. But have you not even done that? If the initial people who had been infected with it obeyed God's laws regarding sexual and intimate relationships. For example, the Bible explicitly forbids homosexual relationships. It forbids you to lie with mankind as with womankind, which has turned out to be one of the easiest ways for the transmission of the AIDS virus is through anal sex because of the porousness of the tissues and so forth, and often blood that gets involved in a situation. And so it is that all sexual relationships, that if these people had obeyed this law, the only person they could have infected would have been their wife. That's all. And it would have stopped right there with the hunters and with their families and would have gone no further. But because it didn't stop there, but because people had sex with a lot of different people. Sure, a woman might be married, but she might have a lot of friends. And they have a very open relationship. And, of course, homosexual relationships were one of the reasons that AIDS spread so rapidly through our own population in years going by. That if people had just simply followed the laws of the Bible, the HIV plague would never have gotten started in the first place. Now, here's a real puzzle. Why on earth, given this truth, and it is true, why on earth would anyone want to argue that the laws that were given to prevent this kind of thing from happening would be done away with. And we're so smart now that we don't have to worry about any of those things anymore, that we can prevent these things from ever happening. But we should know by now that that's just simply not possible. The creation of the AIDS epidemic could have been stopped in its tracks at any number of points by the simple expedient of a people who observed even a part of the law of Moses. They didn't have to get it all right, just certain elements of it. If they just got those right, it never would have gotten started. And there follows, that we have in the world this incredible set of opposites, from prosperity to poverty in nations, and no one really seems to have any consideration for that fact that there might be an underlying cause as to why the world is this way. Some people are racist in their approach to it. They think it has to do with race. Some people think it has to do, well, you're lucky because you wound up getting all these natural resources and what have you. That's what a lot of people say. There follows in our own society a determined effort, it seems, to take an axe to the roots of everything that made this country great. The very things that have made us wealthy, prosperous, healthy, with a secure society, the dominant nation in the world, that all these things somehow must be wrong, and therefore we must take an axe to the root of all this. But now, wait a minute. The English-speaking peoples of the world have not been perfect. Far, far from it. As I've already made allusion to, and I don't even have to go the rest, very much further, all of us know that well enough. This is true. But the basics, is what I'm talking about, of law have been there. That even when law is honored and breached, the law is there. And the law, the basics of the six commandments that I listed off you, these basics found their way into our laws. And there was a time when they were reflected in all kinds of statutes, judgments, codes, city codes, state laws. They were reflected all through our life, our land, and all through our culture at one time. Now, we understand it. The message from this is you don't have to be perfect to be blessed, but you do need certain basics. These laws, individually and collectively, work. They are not the only factors. They may be the most important factors, however. But wait another minute. What about the rest of the law? Because as a people, we haven't done real well with the first 4 commandments, have we? And thereby hangs the tale. The first 4 commandments are spiritual laws, the religious laws. What role do they play in all of this? And why is it that we have been able to prosper without these? Understand this carefully. The law works. It may take time to work, but the law works. And whatever part of the law you get right works. Now, if anybody ever thought that you got to get everything perfect and everything right, we all might as well go jump off a cliff. That's not going to happen. The point is the law works. Whatever part of it you get right works, and it works for you. The man who maintains faithfully the last 6 commandments will benefit greatly from keeping the last 6 commandments. He may even prosper in the world because the laws work, pure and simple. But here lies another problem. It is one that is dogging the steps of our society right now. It is all very well to tell the truth as a way of life. But what is going to happen when the truth starts hurting? You can believe as a way of life, as a philosophy. Forget God. You just believe that truth is better. Perhaps human experience has told you that truth is better. And you have just concluded as an ethical principle, this is what way you want to live your life is by the truth. Then you get into a situation where if you tell the truth, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. And your family. And maybe you're going to wind up going to jail. Whatever it is that you may be up against, the truth is going to hurt. Or maybe you will be embarrassed to the very core of your being by something. What is going to ensure, when that time comes, that you tell the truth, even though it hurts? Because the premise is, if I make a decision that I'm going to keep the last 6 commandments as a code of life, I made that decision. I can change it. I can make exceptions to it. I can decide the truth is not that important in this situation. Right now, a lie may be the most effective course of action. So I'll lie today, and tomorrow I will return to my principles. What's to keep you from doing that? Nothing. It's your decision. You made it. It's your choice. Where is the moral basis of those 6 commandments? Human experience? But what if human experience in the short run seems to dictate otherwise? What if science seems to be saying in the short term, well, we can do this and it won't cause any harm? What if human institutions are beginning to decide collectively, we don't need to do that anymore? When you have kids in school and you're teaching them about sex, what are you going to teach them about morality? And where's that morality going to come from? Because you see, you can't go into school and teach kids about sex and then teach them Christian morality or biblical morality. And even we got courtrooms where there are lawsuits going on as to whether the courtrooms can have the 10 Commandments on the wall of the courtroom, you know, the oldest written law code known to man, I guess, and we can't put it on the code of just as a matter of artistic interest or legal interest. It's crazy, but it's going on all the time around us because there is a determined effort being made to get God out of society so that God is no longer the determining factor or the basis of our rights. Where are we going to be then when God is not the guarantor of our rights? Who is? Congress? The Supreme Court? The President? The Constitution, which is getting reinterpreted all the time? Where is the guarantor of our rights? Where is the guarantor, that protects us from other people harming us? The presumption of the founders of our legal system was that we have rights, that these rights were guaranteed by a creator. But when you can't mention that creator in a classroom, how are you going to make any system of laws stick? You can teach all you want to about ethics in school. And the kids are smart enough to know that if these ethics are based on something some Greek said, 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, what if he was wrong? And this feels good now, or that hurts now, and I'll make my own ethics up as I go along. He made his ethics. Why can't I make mine? Why not? If they can't be internalized based on a belief in a creator, they can only be applied externally by a government that has itself no moral authority, only coercive authority. The government can decide this is wrong and this is right, and the government can make it stick because the government's got guns. And they got men who'll come out and arrest you and take you away and put you in prison. The government can, by use of force, create an authority in a society. The problem is, coercive authority can't hold either without increasing levels of control and violence. And here lies a truth of staggering importance. In fact, the truth that I'm about to say to you may be one of the most important things I say to you all day. I don't think it'll be quite, but it's going to be close. It's something you need to remember and never forget. The first 4 commandments are the guarantors of the last 6. The first 4 commandments are the guarantors of the last 6. If you don't keep the first 4 commandments, you will not be able to hold the last 6. You may keep them for 25 years. A civilization may keep parts of them for 100 years or 200 years or 300 years. But sooner or later, without the first 4, the last 6 will begin to rot and decay in any civilization, and you will come to the things that God said would happen to the people who turned away from Him. The religious, spiritual, and even the ceremonial law is there to guarantee and hold in place the natural law in the hearts and minds of people. There are those who will argue, for example, that the 10 Commandments were abolished at the cross, and that 9 of them were reinstated in the New Testament. But 9 are not enough. The fact is that the 4th commandment, which is the one that's missing, is the keystone of all the rest. There's a scripture in Exodus 31, verse 13. I want to take you there because this is crucial. This is absolutely crucial to understand. Speak to the children of Israel, saying, Verily my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between you and me throughout your generations, that you may know that I am Yahweh that does sanctify you. Now, I don't know how that name should be pronounced. But it's Yahweh, Yahweh, Yehovah, Yahweh, and all the different ways that people think maybe that name should be pronounced. We can say Jehovah because that appears in the King James Bible. Why is that there? Why do I emphasize that in this way? Because it falls strangely on the ears, doesn't it? Yahweh? Well, it's there because it's the Hebrew name of God, and it specifies something I think is very important for us to understand. All too many people assume that the Sabbath is Jewish, that it's the identifying sign of the Jews. But this Scripture does not say that. What this Scripture says, it says something entirely different. It says that the seventh-day Sabbath is the identifying sign of Jehovah. Doesn't it? That's what it says. It's the sign that I am Yahweh. Not that somebody else is. I'm not just some vague generalized God somewhere. I'm not the God that's in every blade of grass. I'm not the God that's in every drop of water. I am a God with a name and a face, an identity. I'm who I am. And it's who I am that is the guarantor of your rights, your freedoms, your liberties, your health, your society, your families, and your marriage, and everything else. And I have guaranteed all this to you by giving you a law that works. That's what this is all about. And unless you can maintain the identity of the Creator, you're not going to indefinitely be able to hold on the rest of the moral structure of the law of God. Now, what can we expect to happen to a people who once had all of that, who were on the good side of this equation, you know, who were the most powerful people in the world, the strongest military, the strongest economy, that people were afraid of? What can we expect to happen to a people who had all that and then lost it? Circumstances that seem to be coming to pass right before our very eyes. What can we expect to happen? Not only in the banning of God from public life, it's also happening in the apparent consequences of that abandonment that are beginning to show everywhere. A moment ago I said, let's go back 100 years and let's look to see what nations were on the good side of this equation and what nations were on the bad side. And we said, look at the English-speaking peoples and look at Africa. I want you to look again at Africa, because Africa may be our future. Maybe where we're headed. Maybe not in my lifetime. I'm 67. May not in any of our lifetimes, because these things take time. And unless God himself decides to step in, which I'll come back to in a moment, what's going to happen? He says, now, I want you to think about this for a moment. What is the attitude of the world around toward the nation that has everything? How do you begin to feel about somebody you fear after a period of time? Hate? Hate follows very closely on the heels of fear. And as a consequence, because so much of the world looks at us and says, those people don't deserve that, they will come to envy, come to hate because they have feared us. And then what's going to happen in the process of time, as because we begin to hack away at the roots of the things that guarantee our rights and guarantee our freedoms and that create the kind of society we've got, where are we going to be when we have hacked off all the limbs and the branches and pulled up the roots and so forth? Where are we going to be? He said, moreover, all these curses will come upon you. Deuteronomy 28:45. They shall pursue you and overtake you till you be destroyed, because you wouldn't listen to the voice of the Lord your God to keep his commandments and his statutes which he has commanded you. Who? The Lord your God. The word Lord, notice in your Bible, it's small caps. Every time you see that, it's a substitute for the Hebrew word Yahweh. And it's the identity of God that we're talking about here. It is him whom you are ignoring. Not just some faceless, nameless God, some generalized pantheonic God. Not at all. And they shall be upon you for a sign and a wonder upon your seed, your children, forever. Because you didn't serve the Lord your God with joyfulness and gladness of heart because of the abundance of everything you had. Okay? Here's what's coming to you. Remember, if this were being written today, the terms of reference would be different, but the underlying message will be identical. If you will not observe to do all the words of the Lord your God that are written in this book, that you may fear his glorious and awful name, Yahweh your God, you won't do this, then the Lord will make your plagues wonderful, the plagues of your seed, even great plagues of long continuance, sore sickness of long continuance. Moreover, he will bring upon you the diseases of Egypt which you were afraid of, and they will cleave to you. Every sickness, every plague which is not even written in the book of this law. I'll bring some of them you've never heard of, as a matter of fact, upon you, until you are destroyed. You shall be left few in number, whereas you were like the stars of heaven for multitude, because you wouldn't obey the voice of the Lord your God. And it shall come to pass that as the Lord rejoiced over you to do good, multiply you, so the Lord will rejoice over you to destroy you, to bring you to nothing. You shall be plucked from off the land where you go to possess it. The Lord will scatter you among all the people from one end of the earth even to the other. There you shall serve other gods, which neither you nor your fathers ever knew. Wood, stone, and among these nations you shall find no ease. The sole of your foot will not find rest. The Lord will give you a trembling heart, a failing of eyes, sorrow of mind. Your life shall hang in doubt before you. You shall fear day and night. You shall have no assurance of your life. In the morning you shall say, would God it were even. At even you shall say, would God it were morning. For the fear of your heart wherewith you shall fear, and for the sight of your eyes which you shall see. Remember, ancient language, modern principles. The Lord will bring you to Egypt again with ships by the way I spoke to you, that you shall see it no more again. There you'll be sold to your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Take a good long look at Africa. Take a look at Africa's history. Take a look at what the slave trade did to Africa in years gone by, and see your future and the future of your children. Because it didn't happen to those people because they were more wicked than anybody else. Their fathers, generations before them, lost contact with God, lost contact with the way of life, lost contact with the way things should be lived. And as a result of that, they suffered. And I think that when we read the stories of what happened in the slave trade, the misery and the staggering misery of people who were brought across the Atlantic on those slave ships, the brutality with which they are treated, it has not been so awfully long ago. It has not been so awfully long ago that another people, white people, good people, smart people in Germany suffered a similar fate. Instead of being on slave ships, they were crammed into boxcars and carted across Germany and across Poland, worked until they dropped, and then gassed in gas chambers, and their bodies burnt and sent up in ashes. How long ago was this, folks? 60 years? 70 years? We think we have come so far in the world. We haven't come any distance at all. And what distance we have come is due entirely, solely, to the grace of God, to the law of God, to what little we have known of His law, and what little we have practiced of it. It's going to take a long time. Mercifully, in the natural course of events, it will not happen in my lifetime. But if I understand prophecy, I'm not sure God's going to allow the trend to continue. Because the passage above is shot through with references to divine intervention. If you notice them, I'll do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to bring this. And the reason why he keeps saying that, I think, is because he is not willing to allow the long-term consequences of this to come home to roost. He's going to step in and take a hand so that we can avoid a 1,000-year descent into darkness from which we'll never find our way out again. I believe the cracks and crevices we are beginning to see in our culture, from school shootings to 1 out of 3 babies being born illegitimate to mad cow disease, are mostly the natural result of the abandonment of our Creator as the guarantor of everything we hold dear. I think that is why these things are beginning to happen. Now, God answered this on a very special occasion. But as I said, God's hand is not evident in this. But it could begin any day now that His hand would be. What should a people like us do, knowing these things, facing, the bitter truth of these passages of Scriptures? What should we do? Where do we go from here? God answered this on a very special occasion. You know the story about how the temple of God finally was built by Solomon, how that David was not allowed to build it, and Solomon finally did. It's hard for us, thinking back through the generations, to realize the enormous import of this building that Solomon constructed, the temple of God. And the story of the dedication of the temple, it's enough to make every hair on your body stand up to think of what it meant to those people and all of them that were there, and how that whenever it was all done, Solomon made this great prayer to God. It's a marvelous prayer, and how God responded. The passage is in 2 Chronicles chapter 7. And it says, when God made an end of praying, the fire came down from heaven and consumed the burnt offerings and sacrifices, and the glory of the Lord filled the house. Notice, and again, the name of God is used here. The glory of Yahweh filled the house. And the priest couldn't even go in because the glory of the Lord that filled the Lord's house. And when all the children of Israel saw the fire came down, the glory of the Lord upon the house, they bowed themselves or their faces to the ground upon the pavement and worshiped and praised God, saying, for he is good, for his mercy endures for heaven. I can only imagine what that must have been like. You can't get your mind around it, having seen this and experienced it. In verse 12, though, after all is said and done and everybody's gone their way, the Lord, Yahweh, appeared to Solomon by night. Quiet, all alone in his palace.